So when you open Lightroom, this should be the screen that you see. And it's divided into 3 columns with a menu in the top right hand corner and then this kind of row at the bottom here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to bring some images into Lightroom, and we do that by going to the left hand corner and pressing the import button. So this will bring up the import dialog. Again, the screen is divided into 3 columns. On the left hand side is our source column, so this is where the images are coming from. You can see here on the left hand side, these are the hard drives on my computer, and this is the memory card from my camera under devices. And when you put that in, it will automatically detect it and open import. In the middle, we've got the thumbnails of the images that are on that memory card. And then on the right, we have basically where sort of our destination, where the images are going to be stored on our computer. So at the bottom, we can choose between thumbnail images or full size image, so we can get a closer look. And we can check all or uncheck all, and then we can go in and just untick and tick individual images as well. If you hold down the shift button, you can do multiples. You can change the sort order at the bottom there, and you can increase and decrease the size of the thumbnails as well. On the right hand side, we've got so basically these are things that you can do while images are being imported. So probably the most important really these 2 here. So rename files. I don't usually bother renaming while I'm importing, but you can do that if that's something you want to do. And the apply during import, so you can apply various settings from Lightroom, but the most important is keywords. So with keywords you can attach kind of words that can be then used for searching later on within Lightroom itself. So I'm just going to go in and select a few images. So I'm just going to go in and check it. So I'm just going to go in and select a few images to import. And it's going from my memory card. And so I'm going to import them to this example catalog here. And what I'm going to do, the best way that I've found to catalog my images is to create a new folder and use the location that the photographs were taken. So I'm just going to call this one farm, click on choose, and then you'll see on the right hand side we've got the farm folder here, and then automatically Lightroom will create a date that these images were taken, another folder within inside that folder, and this helps so that if you go back to this location again, and maybe a couple of times, each time you go back it'll put a new folder, new dated folder with the new images in. And this is great this is kind of a great way to kind of help find the images that you're looking for at a later time. So I'm just going to go down to the bottom right hand corner and just click on import. So I've imported those images, and I've also imported some other images just to give you some more examples of how to use Lightroom. So the first thing, if you look on the left hand side here, you'll see the Lightroom hard drive that I've imported my images to. What you'll notice is there's the date folders, but without the actual folder that they're inside. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to click on there, right click and go to show parent folder. And I think this is quite important because then that kind of gives you a better... So now we've got 2 folders, we've got example images, and you can see the different dated folders in there from when the different dates of these images were taken. And then we've got the farm folder there, the ones that I've just imported. So in my Lightroom catalog, each of these folders would be the location of wherever I've taken the images. Or for example, for something like portraits, it might be the person's name or maybe the company that I'm shooting for or something like that. But just an identifier basically to identify the images quite simply. Okay, so on this left hand side, we've kind of got a catalog. So we've got all photographs that will show all the photographs in the catalog. All synced photographs will be the images that are synced over the cloud. and then your obviously your different folders for that are on the hard drive. And if you just select one of them folders, it'll just show you the images that are inside. So I'm just going to show you collections as well. So basically a collection's a bit like a folder that we can put various images into. But it's not a physical folder on a hard drive. It's just like a temporary folder that we can put images into. Say, for example, that you're putting a portfolio together. You can take images from different areas and put them into here, and it'll just kind of reference those. So as an example, I'll just show you create collection. I'm just going to call that portfolio. Create that. Okay, you see there's nothing in there at the moment, and then I can go into my all photographs. I'm just going to pull a couple of images into here, and then if I go there, you can see the images are in there. And if I delete an image from there, so if I delete that image, I'm just going to press backspace or delete. That's deleted the image from there, and if I go back to all photographs, you can see the image is still in there. It's this image here. And this is really, really useful. So this just kind of gives you the opportunity to kind of mix and match images. Like say for portfolios, it's a brilliant opportunity just to kind of like pull things together. Once you're in portfolios, you can drag and drop them around. Once you're in collections, you can drag and drop things as well, order them in different ways. Just coming down along the bottom here, so we've got our thumbnail images. Again, we've got this kind of like thumbnail full screen view, and then we've got things like this. So this is so like a comparison, so we can compare between different images. And we can just drag an image in so that we can see the difference between the images. And we've also got a before and after, so that when we're editing, we can see kind of what's happening in the before and after, and see how where our images come to from the original version. And then so if I click back on here and go back to the library setting, again just pick an image. So we also have this here, which is what we call a survey. So this, you can pick several images here and show them all at the same time. So you can pick quite a lot of images if you want to, and you can show them all at the same time. And then it's got these kind of like crosses and things on that you can go through the images, and if you decide, until you kind of whittle them down to a set of images that you're happy with. Okay, so the other things that we've got. So basically, we're in the library module here. And so the library module is really where we get the information about our images. So we can do a very basic, very quick kind of edit. So if we go into the full screen, we can just do a very quick basic edit to change sort of some of the basic settings just to get our exposure to roughly right. And then we'll move on to edit it properly in a moment. And this is just great. This is just great just to get everything in the same place very, very quickly. Again, we've got keywords here. So if I find one of the images that we were using before, so like this one here, and you'll see there in keyword tags we've got color, farm, and that's what I put in as I was importing them. And this can be great for searching and things like that. And then at the bottom here, we've got all the information of our images. So the date it was taken, the dimensions in terms of pixels, focal length, ISO, shutter speed. It's really great for just kind of looking back and seeing what caused the effect that we've got. So for example, this has got shallow depth of field, so I can have a look here and I can see that it was shot at f2.8, and that's why there's such shallow depth of field there. Okay, so I've just clicked on develop at the top in the top menu there, and develop is basically the next stage. It's where we do the main bulk of our editing in Lightroom. So you can see now whatever folder that we picked in library. So in library, I've got all photographs picked. But if you picked one of these folders here, when you go to develop, the folder option isn't there anymore. And these are just the images that are in that folder that are shown at the bottom there. So you can see at the side, we've got presets. So we can basically, anything that we apply to an image, we can save as a preset so that we can use it on other images in the future. We've got a history here for anybody who's used Photoshop, where you can kind of go back to any point in the process. And then we've got our collections here as well. So our collections are visible in the develop module. At the very top here, we've got the navigator, which kind of shows us what's going on the image. You can see when I zoom in there, and you just zoom in by clicking, that it shows you the area that's zoomed into. And we can change the zoom. So fit here on the top just basically fits the image to the screen. But then we've also got varying zoom amounts, and we can change that just by clicking on them two little arrows there and just dropping that down. We can go all the way in so that we can edit on a pixel by pixel level. Usually I find kind of 100 and 200 is a very good place to be. Occasionally you might want to go in and just edit something ever so slightly, like we've got a little fly or something there. We might want to take that out. We can just get in a little bit closer. But generally the 100, 200's usually about right for zooming in. And you can just click on the image anywhere and it will zoom in and out. So one of the other great things about Lightroom is the way that we can basically rate our images. So what I usually do when I bring images in is kind of have a first pass through, if you like, and I'll kind of rate the images. So down on the right hand side here, we've got all these like a variety of filters. And so basically what I usually do is I pick this middle filter here, which is anything that's unflagged. I pick this first one, which is flagged and unflagged are now selected. And so this one here is the rejected photographs. So basically I can go through the images, and if I right click, you'll see that set flag, and I can set the flag to flagged, unflagged or rejected. At the moment it's unflagged because I haven't done anything to it. So I'm going to just set that as rejected, and you can do the same by pressing X, and you'll see that it's disappeared now. But if I click on the rejected flag, you'll see that it comes back in again. And if I clear that, you can see that so that basically gives us a really quick and easy way to kind of rate our photographs and to kind of edit the ones out that we don't want to edit. They don't go anywhere. They still stay in Lightroom. They've just got this kind of filter on so that we can kind of filter it down to our best images. So I'm just going to go back and re-pick that. So to pick an image, it's P, flag as pick. To unpick an image, it's U, and that will remove the flag. So I'm just going to give that a P there. And again, you can take out so if I take out the rejected images and the unflagged, we've only got one flagged image in there. And so that's why that's the only one that's shown. So I'm just going to bring them back. So it's really good to just kind of go through when you import a load of images, just go through and use that system just to get rid of the images that you don't want to edit. And that'll just leave you with a nice kind of batch of images that you want to use. Again, collections, you can use as many collections as you want. And again, it's quite a good way of kind of editing down some of the when you get to the point where you've got just a load of really good images, of just kind of going through them, moving them around, seeing how they all work together. And there's kind of lots of ways of using these. And then we've also got things here, some more filters here. So this is like anything that's been edited or anything that hasn't been edited, so that, you know, if we've missed one, we'll find that in there. There's a star system as well, so this corresponds to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on your keyboard. And then you've got colors here, again, which is basically these relate to 6 up to 0. on your keyboard. And so there's all of these different ways of flagging your images so that you can kind of sort through them in lots of different ways. Generally, I find myself using the flagged filters and the color filters, sometimes the star filters, but really I find that I don't really need to go beyond kind of maybe one or two levels of that, as I'm just kind of narrowing things down. Okay, so now onto the kind of main editing part, if you like. So we've got this column down the right hand side. And really the best way to proceed is just to kind of start from the top. So you'll see on the right hand side at the top here, we've got the histogram. So this is available in both the classic version and the kind of online version of Lightroom. But it's not available on the kind of the web browser version, which is a bit of a shame really. However, this works exactly the same as the histogram on your camera. The only difference here is you've got the different colors overlaid on top of each other. And if you look here down at the tone curve as well, you can also see the histograms in the background there as well. So obviously this gives you exactly the same kind of really useful tool that you've got on your camera to see kind of how your exposure sits. But also this allows you kind of to make sure, again, that you're not going over with the shadows and highlights the same as you would on your camera. But it also ensures that, you know, you've got the detail where you want it. The histogram doesn't have to be exactly right on here, because say you wanted to make this image a bit darker and moodier, then obviously everything's going to be over to the left. And again, if you wanted to make something a bit brighter and have a bit more kind of lightness about it, the histogram would end up over to the right. So it's ever so slightly different, but ideally you still want to have as much detail in the image as possible. And you know, if you choose to like lose some of the shadow or highlight detail, then it should be kind of one of those things that you've done kind of on purpose. You've also got these kind of triangles here. So if you overexpose, you can see there, if you take it too far, the red highlighted areas are where the details have burnt out completely. And then on the other side, you see the blue there is where the blacks have got no detail in them. That's a really useful kind of tool to use. The other thing that we've got, you can see here, if we hover over, you can see it's showing blacks, shadows, exposure, highlights and whites. And this corresponds to this bit here about what's being altered when we move any of these sliders. So really you can see when I hover over the exposure slider, that it's affecting this middle part, the mid-tones, more than anything else. If I change this, it's affecting the darker areas of the image. And if I move this, you can see it's affecting the highlight image, and the same with the whites and the blacks. And this gives us some really great control over the tonal range of our images. So just before I do anything else, just a really great thing about Lightroom is that it's non-destructive. So really you can go through all of this and you can change any of these sliders however you want, and you can really mess up your image. But the great thing about it is you can always go down at the bottom and just click on reset, and that'll reset the whole image back to what it was before. The other thing that you've got, you can see here on the left hand side, is the history, and you can basically go to any point back into your history. So if you make a few mistakes and you don't get it quite right and you can't quite remember what you've done, you can just go back through the history and just go back to wherever you want, back to the original image. So for me, my process really is to adjust that initial color balance first, which is this here, so a white balance. You can see it's got as shot there. If you drop that down, this basically reproduces the white balance settings that are on your camera. So if you say shot an image in under tungsten lighting, you get that kind of really orange color. You can just click it onto one of these, and that will kind of do the best job of kind of correcting those colors. You might find you have to adjust them a little bit afterwards. The other thing that we've got is this quite helpful tool here, is the kind of eyedropper, and that's really useful, say for example an image that's got some color issues to it. So say something like this. And all we have to do is we just put this eyedropper tool onto an area of kind of light grey, and we just click, and that will adjust the colour back to the correct white balance. It doesn't always get it absolutely perfect, and some of it's, it's quite subjective. So this is a little bit blue in here, so I just want to warm it up a bit, so I can just slide that a little bit. You can see there's a little bit of yellow coming in there, a bit of red, and that just kind of again, that's a subjective thing, so that's very much about what you want in the image. You can see there's a couple of red highlights here actually, which is interesting. Just a little bit is burnt out there, and you can just see if I just take that highlight slider down, maybe take exposure down a little bit dark, take the white down, just that white bit is just bring a bit more detail back into that burnt out highlight there. So I've just picked a relatively simple image to go through from kind of start to finish. So we look at the exposure, and we can actually see that it's kind of over to the left a little bit. It could probably do with being a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to push it over. That's probably about far enough for me. It's starting to go a little bit kind of bright over there for me. I think this bit was in shade compared to this that was in the daylight, and that's why we've kind of got that effect there. And so I'm just, what I want to do is try and kind of reduce the contrast a little bit. So by moving the highlight slider here, you can see some of these highlight areas have just kind of got a little bit darker. And the kind of the shadow areas I'm going to lighten up a little bit by moving the shadow slider. And what this does is gives me a very flat image to start with. So I like using the tone curve, and the advantage of using the tone curve is it does a very much more graduated job of increasing contrast. So basically, just if you pull one side down and the other side up into this S curve, it's nice smooth graduation of tones, and basically the steeper this is, the more contrast there is. Now this works for me because I've been it's the way I'm used to work, and I've used curves for a long time, and it's more of a kind of hang on from Photoshop really, but there's nothing to stop you just to use contrast, and you basically can get the same results, and it's kind of down to how you find it easier to work, because ultimately none of these things matter. It doesn't matter which slider you slide or in which order. You can go back to any of them at any point and slide them to a different place. But because of the way that Lightroom works, so basically what it does is it doesn't actually import anything. All it's doing is creating some previews of the images, and then when we get to the end and export the images, that's when it applies all the changes that you've done. So whatever you do here, it doesn't really matter what the order is, so long as that final image is what you're after. So what might work for me in terms of my approach to editing images might not work for somebody else, and there's lots of different ways of doing it. And the best way basically to learn what works for you is just to go through everything, just play about with some images and kind of really experiment. So that's kind of our exposure area there, and this to a certain degree, the tone curve as well. You can see here that it affects the same kind of things that does, and you can kind of play with the sliders here as well. So we'll go down to the next area, which is presence here. So presence is really kind of sharpness and things like that. So these are very easy to overdo, so you do need to take care with it. They can kind of make your images look a bit granular if they're applied too harshly, and they can affect the color, the kind of the color and everything as well. So you can see here when I increase clarity, it does actually quite a nice job on this because it punches out those blacks and highlights, and it's just the right sort of image for it. But on other images, it maybe wouldn't work so well. And if I go down the other way, you can't really see what it's doing on this image, but if I take clarity the other way, it softens everything. So you can see there everything's softened, but and that can be helpful in some situations, but I wouldn't use it for anything like a portrait or anything like that where you're trying to soften the skin a little bit or something like that, because it can be a bit too full on, and there are other ways of doing that which are kind of better than this. So I don't know, maybe add a little bit of clarity in there. I can just see some black areas where there's it's losing the shadow, so I'm just going to push that back up that way a little bit. In the top here we've got kind of, so this is your crop, and to me it's not quite straight, so I'm just going to use that to rotate it, make it a little bit straighter. I'm going to leave the curves for the moment. So the next one down is HSL and colour. So basically this allows us to select a particular range of colours and then adjust them specifically. So hue is the actual colour itself. So you can see here, from maybe move some of the greens, you can see that it's affecting everything there. So this is great, and again it can be overdone, so you have to be careful with it, but this is great if you're just wanting to add a little bit of punch to a colour. Say somebody's wearing a red coat or something like that and it's a little bit washed out or something in the actual image, you can just use this to bring a bit of punch back to the actual colour itself. So hue is the actual colour, the shade of colour itself. Saturation is basically how much of that colour there is, so how powerful that colour is, the impact that it's got. So if we look at these greens, and you can see we can either reduce that to how there's very little colour in it, or there's lots of colour. And then we've got luminance, which is how dark or light that kind of colour is. And again, so a combination of these can be really helpful, just to kind of like make a particular colour much more pronounced. And then so this can be kind of broken down into all of the sliders on once, which is quite handy. Now, I haven't really touched on black and white images at the moment, but if we go at the top, there's actually a black and white button at the top here. And if we go back down to our colours, these then affect our black and white images in a particular way. So you can see actually straight away, as soon as I touch the green slider, because there's so much green in there, by reducing that, that's starting to increase contrast. And the yellow as well, because there's quite a bit of yellow in there. So that can help us to increase contrast in our images by adjusting those colours. In the past, using black and white film in film cameras, we would have used colour filters like a green, yellow, orange or red filter, and that would have altered these colours on the film for us in a similar way. And then we've got lens correction here. So Lightroom is very good at identifying different cameras and lenses and things like that, and has a whole load of profiles. And basically this will help to take any imperfections out of the lenses or the cameras, and just give you a much kind of sharper, better image basically. And all you do is you just drop down, find your camera if it doesn't find it automatically, and it will sort out the rest for you. And there's a couple of other tweaks here. I always put on remove chromatic aberration. You don't see it very often in images, but occasionally, usually in quite bright light, you can tend to see it as a result of kind of lens flare and things like that, and it's just like purple fringing and things on your images. There's no harm in having it on, to be honest. And then the other thing here is transform. Okay, so we have this image here of kind of a little building, a shed. It's kind of architectural, so it's got these straight lines. And one of the things that happens quite a lot in photography is when you take a photograph of a building, you get converging verticals, or you get things that aren't quite straight. So this can help us with converging verticals and kind of distortion that's been caused by the angle that we take the photograph on. And this can be useful for other things beyond that. So like, if you've got looking up in a forest and you've got the leaning trees, you can kind of use that to kind of change them a little bit. And this is just really about kind of getting the right look from your photograph. Sometimes those converging verticals and that can look not quite right, especially if they're a bit odd, or in this case the building's a bit odd shaped, so it's quite good to just straighten it up a little bit. It gives us a more pleasing image. And if you click the constrain crop bit here, you can see it'll take those white edges out. And then sort of a bit further down here, effects, we've got a kind of post-crop vignette, which is just basically darkening the edges down. This can be quite useful, just to bring a bit more focus into the center of the image, especially if you've got kind of like for portraits and things where you've got somebody right in the center. It just helps to darken things down. Again, there's other ways of doing it. And this is just kind of a very simple version of it. And there's other ways of doing it, kind of more complex. And then we've got grain, which might seem a bit odd, wanting to add grain to something. But this can sometimes, if you've got a particularly noisy image, just adding a little bit of grain can actually help to break that noise down and make it look a lot more natural. And it's just an effect that can produce some nice effects anyway, and just make things look a bit more rugged and a bit more kind of gritty, if you like. So then you've got calibration here, which is just basically tweaking the colours over everything that's been imported into Lightroom. So say you're finding that on a particular lens or something like that, that you're getting a particular fringing on the images or a particular colour. So this is just calibration. Okay, so just another couple of things to mention here. So these are quite powerful tools. I'm just going to zoom in here. And so, like I said, we've got this kind of little green fly buggy thing on here. So what I'm going to do, I want to get rid of that, and I'm going to just pick this is the heel brush here, and basically what we can do is so at the moment I've got it on clone, and so basically if I click there and then click on there, what it'll do, it'll copy from there to there and get rid of it. And it's done quite a good job, but to be honest, the best way of doing it is with heel. So if I use the heel brush, and all you do is you just click and it'll take the best texture it can find to do that, and it's relatively seamless actually. I mean, you can see it's copied over from there, but you can kind of tweak that a little bit if you want to get rid of that, and it's very good. One of the things with Lightroom, it's not really about compositing. It's not that complex when it comes to kind of cloning and things like that. So it's great for taking out little kind of blemishes and some larger things, and it does a good job. So say you've got a bit of a blemish on a corner or something like that, or there's a branch sticking out of somebody's head or something like that. You can sometimes get rid of those things, but it's a little bit more difficult than say going into Photoshop and having a full editing package there that can do those things. However, it's a very, very useful tool and saves you from using something more complex more often than not for doing smaller things. One of the other important tools we've got is kind of masking, and probably the brush is probably the most important really for photographs. And so basically what we do is we kind of just go down, and we can choose any of these things here to kind of create a mask with. So if I just paint on there, you can just see there's a bit of kind of colour going on there. That's because I've got the set mask set to blue, and if I just go down to colour overlay settings, so I can change that. So I'll change that to green, say, so we might see that a bit more. And you can see it's just coming through. If I increase the flow of that, you should see it a bit more. And what I'm basically doing is painting the mask onto the image. And then so what I can do now is I can change any of these settings, and that will only affect where that mask is. And so you can see that's for a very rough mask, that's done actually quite a nice job that there. And so what we can use this for is what we call in photography dodging and burning. And so basically dodging and burning is where we just use sort of little masks, just little adjustments to kind of say darken down a little area. And again, the great thing about Lightroom is everything's adjustable. So if you overdo it, so I've definitely overdone it there, I can just go into the sliders and just reduce that a little bit and get a much better result. And again, you can pick things. You can make as many of these masks as you want, and you can go in and just kind of like, so I can just affect the highlights with a brush. So I'm just going to go over and just affect them highlights there. And this is really where you start to get a bit more advanced with editing your images. You know, you can start to do things like vignetting and things like that, and you can just see, you can start to really be quite creative. And this is the sort of things that we would have done traditionally in the darkroom. These are the dodging and burning is kind of one of the big things around photography, how you control your image really. Okay, so I've covered pretty much everything in there. It's quite a lot of information in that. So really, once you've done your developing and everything, our next thing would be to export our image. So we'd go back to library, we'd pick the images that we'd edited and that we wanted to export. So I'm just going to export this one here. And you go to export in the bottom left-hand corner next to the import. And this looks quite complex, but it's fairly simple. So you just basically go down the rows again. So the first places are our export location, so a specific folder. So I'm going to choose my folder. I'm just going to go to my Lightroom hard drive, choose. I'm going to put it in a subfolder called exports. File naming, I'm just going to call this flower, and we can get quite complex with our naming. So if you drop down custom settings, there's lots of different ways. We can click on edit, and that will give us a completely custom way of naming our images, and we can have like a sequence of numbers afterwards as well. So if I put 01 in there, you can see that it's gone to 01. And if we go down to file settings, so at the moment it's set at DNG, so that's to export as a raw file, but I'm going to export it as a JPEG, so I'll export this as though I'm going to upload it online. Quality, because we want it online, we want it to be a relatively small file size, so I'm going to leave that about maybe 85, which isn't too bad. It loses some information, but it's still quite high quality. Color space. So color space, you've got a choice of a few different things, but when you're exporting for web, this should always be on sRGB. Image size, so you can click here, resize to fit. I usually have it on long edge, and that's kind of the best way for me, I find, to export things. So I want my long edge, because I know this is going to go on online. I don't want it to be any more than a couple of thousand pixels. So probably smaller than that. So I'll change that to 1500 pixels. That'll be a big enough image to put online. Gonna add a little bit of sharpening in there, just for screen, standard amount. Include all metadata, so that'll be any kind of keywords and things that you've added to it. You can add watermarks if you want to. And then I'm just going to go down to the bottom here and click on export, and you can see that's exporting the file there. So if I now go to my Lightroom hard drive and go to exports, and there's my image there. So that's quite a long video just about the basic tools in Lightroom. Hopefully you've got everything out of that you need. I'm going to do some more detailed tutorials and things to go with this as well. Just breaking it down into the component parts and going into a bit more detail about them. But really, that's pretty much everything you need to know to get started. Obviously, the difference between the Lightroom Classic, which this one is, to the online version of Lightroom, like the standard version, is just really these are the modules here. Again, I'll do them as separate things in another video. But to get started, at least anyway, this is everything that you need to know to get yourself going. And the best way really to learn Lightroom is just play with the images, just go through and try every slider and see what it does, and just push the images to the limits. Like, so you can always press that reset button, that'll take you back to the beginning, or you can use the history, and that'll you can just take it back to whatever stage you want, or take it back to the previous kind of thing that you did to it. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. I hope that's been of some help.